I can still hear the clinking of silverware against the fine china, the sound that usually signals a comforting family meal, but now triggers a visceral reaction of rage deep in my gut, because that was the sound filling the silence right after my mother looked me dead in the eye and told me she had given my entire inheritance to my sister. There was no hesitation, no guilt, just a matter of fact statement delivered over a plate of stuffing and cranberry sauce, as if she were telling me she'd switched laundry detergents. And I remember gripping my fork so hard my knuckles turned white because I honestly thought I was going to snap the metal in half. She smiled that sickeningly sweet smile she reserves for when she's gaslighting me and said, "Your sister got the insurance pay out, honey, all of it, because look at you. You have a career, a house. A 401k, you don't need it, but Sarah needs a fresh start." And in that moment, the grief of losing my father, the years of resentment, and the sheer audacity of her betrayal collided into a singular point of clarity. I didn't scream, I didn't flip the table, and I didn't cry. Instead, I took a slow sip of my wine, set the glass down with a deliberate click, and asked a single question that turned their smug victory into a criminal investigation. But before I tell you exactly what I said and how the police ended up at our front door on Thanksgiving night, I need to ask you something. Was I wrong for destroying my family over money, or would you have burned it all down too if you found out your own mother stole your father's last gift to you? To understand why this Thanksgiving was the breaking point, you have to understand the dynamic I've been living with my entire life, specifically the hierarchy in our house where my younger sister, Sarah, sat on a golden throne, and I was essentially the hired help who happened to share their DNA. I'm 30, 2 years old, an architect, and I've worked for every single thing I have, scraping through college on scholarships and loans, working 2 jobs, and building a life from the ground up, without asking my parents for a dime since I was 18. But Sarah, who is 29, has never finished anything she's started in her life. She dropped out of 3 different colleges, all of which my parents paid for out of their retirement savings. She's had 5 fiancés in the last 6 years, and she treats money like it's a replenishable resource that magically appears in her bank account whenever she cries hard enough. My father was a good man, a quiet man, but he was an enabler because he loved my mother, and my mother worshipped the ground Sarah walked on, always making excuses for her failures, blaming the professors for her bad grades, blaming the bosses for her getting fired, and blaming the world for not handing Sarah a living on a silver platter. I loved my dad, I really did, but he was passive. He let Mom run the show to keep the peace, and for years I just accepted that I was the stable one, which is really just code for the child they don't have to worry about, and therefore don't have to care about as much. 6 months ago, my dad passed away from a sudden heart attack, and it shattered my world because, in the last few years, he and I had actually gotten close. He'd started seeing through Sarah's manipulation, and I think he realized he'd been unfair to me. So we spent weekends fishing or just working on his vintage Mustang, and he would apologize in his own quiet way for how things were. During those afternoons in the garage, he explicitly told me, "I know I haven't always stood up for you, son, but I've made sure things are set right in the end. I've got a life insurance policy, a big one, and I want you to know that I've split it 50/50, fair and square, because I want you to use your half to pay off your mortgage." He was adamant about it, looking me in the eye with a seriousness that I now realize was him trying to protect me from exactly what was happening right now. After the funeral, which was a blur of grief and Sarah making a scene about how she was the most devastated person in the room despite not visiting him for months prior, the topic of the estate went quiet. I didn't push it because I was grieving, and frankly, I didn't care about the money. I just missed my dad, but I assumed the legal process was just moving slowly. Weeks turned into months, and every time I asked Mom about the probate or the insurance, she would wave me off, saying, "It's complicated," or "I'm just not ready to deal with the paperwork yet," or "Don't be so greedy, give me time to grieve," which made me feel like a vulture, so I backed off, not realizing that she wasn't grieving. She was scheming. Fast forward to November, the healing. Thanksgiving, the first one without Dad, and Mom insisted we all come over to the family house to be together, claiming it was what Dad would have wanted, and I agreed, mostly because I wanted to feel close to him in the house he built. I drove 3 hours to get there, feeling a pit in my stomach the whole way, a premonition that something was off, but I pushed it down, telling myself to be the bigger person, to be the supportive son. When I pulled into the driveway, the first thing I noticed was a brand new car parked right in the center of the drive, a gleaming white luxury SUV with temporary tags, the kind of car that cost more than my first house, and my stomach dropped because I knew Sarah was broke, again, having just lost her job at a boutique because she refused to work weekends. I walked inside, and the house smelled like roast turkey and sage, a scent that should have been nostalgic but instead felt suffocating, and there was Sarah, sitting on the couch with a glass of champagne, wearing a designer dress I knew she couldn't afford, looking like the cat that ate the canary. Mom was in the kitchen, frantically bustling around, acting overly cheerful, almost manic, and when I asked whose car was in the driveway, Sarah just giggled and said, "Mine, isn't it gorgeous? A little pick-me-up." And I looked at Mom, waiting for the lecture about financial responsibility, but Mom just beamed and said, "She deserves something nice after such a hard year." I felt the blood pressure rising in my neck, but I kept my mouth shut, helping set the table, pouring the wine, playing the role of the good son while Sarah sat on her phone, probably posting photos of her new car to Instagram. We sat down to eat, and the empty chair at the head of the table was a screaming void, a reminder that the only person who ever had a semblance of reason in this house was gone. We went through the motions, passing the potatoes, complimenting the turkey, but the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, and I could tell Mom was building up to something because she kept glancing at Sarah and then at me, her eyes darting around nervously. Finally, after we'd cleared the main course and were waiting for pie, Mom cleared her throat, that specific little ahem that always preceded a lecture or a command, and she clasped her hands on the table. "I want to talk about your father's insurance money." She started, and my ears perked up because I had been waiting for this update for half a year. "The payout came through last week," she continued, avoiding my eyes, looking strictly at the floral centerpiece. "It was substantial, $500,000. I nodded, feeling a wave of relief that the process was finally over, and I waited for the "and here is your check" part, but instead, she took a breath and delivered the line that brings us back to the beginning of this story. "I've been thinking a lot about fairness," she said, "and I decided that since you are doing so well, and Sarah is struggling to find her footing, the fair thing to do was to give Sarah the full payout. You don't need it, you have your life together, but this money is going to save your sister." Sarah chimed in immediately, smiling. "I'm going to start a business, a lifestyle brand, and the car was just a business expense, obviously." And she clinked her glass against Mom's, as if they had just pulled off a heist, which, effectively, they had. I sat there, frozen, processing the words. "You gave her everything?" I asked, my voice remarkably calm given the volcano erupting inside me. "Yes," Mom said, her tone hardening, shifting from nervous to defensive, "and I don't want to hear a word of complaint. Your father would have wanted her to be taken care of. You are a man, you can take care of yourself. Sarah needs help." That was the moment, the justification, the weaponizing of my father's memory to fund my sister's delusions. It wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about the disrespect, the lie, the rewriting of my father's wishes. I looked at the new SUV in the driveway through the window, then at my sister's smirk, then at my mother's defiant face, and I realized that this wasn't just unfairness. This was something else entirely. So that's the situation I was in, sitting at a Thanksgiving table with a stomach full of turkey and a heart full of betrayal, realizing my own mother had cut me out completely to fund my sister's luxury lifestyle. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and really think about what you would do in my shoes. Would you walk away and cut your losses to save the family relationship, or would you drop the nuclear bomb I was currently holding in my back pocket? Comment below if you think I should have just let it go, or if you think they deserved what was coming to them. I took a deep breath, and the silence stretched out for an uncomfortable 10 seconds as I swirled the wine in my glass. I didn't scream, I didn't yell. I just looked at my mother with a level of cold detachment I didn't know I possessed and said, "Mom, just so I'm clear, you're saying you received the check for the full $500,000 and you signed it over to Sarah, or you deposited it and transferred it?" She rolled her eyes, exasperated. "I deposited the check, which was made out to me as the spouse, and then I wrote Sarah a check. It's done. It's my money to distribute as I see fit." I nodded slowly, pulling my phone out of my pocket. "That's interesting," I said, tapping the screen to open an email I had received 3 days prior. An email I hadn't mentioned yet because I wanted to surprise them with the good news that the paperwork was finally done. But now it was going to be a different kind of surprise, because I continued, my voice dropping an octave. "I'm looking at a PDF of Dad's policy update from 2 years ago. The one where he removed you as the primary beneficiary after you spent their joint savings on Sarah's second wedding without asking him." The color drained from my mother's face faster than I have ever seen in my life. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "Dad made me the sole beneficiary of the policy, Mom," I said, turning the phone screen around so she could see the document. "He made me the beneficiary, and he named me the executor of the estate because he knew. He specifically told me he knew that if you got the money, you would waste it on Sarah and leave me with nothing. He wanted to ensure the split was fair, so he trusted me to distribute it, not you." Sarah stopped drinking her champagne, the glass hovering halfway to her mouth. But Mom said the check came," Sarah stammered. I looked at my mother, whose hands were now trembling. "That's the part I'm confused about," I said, leaning forward, resting my elbows on the table. "If the policy pays out to me, and the insurance company confirmed to me via email on Tuesday that the check was mailed to my address, which is this address because I never changed it on his old paperwork, then the check that arrived here last week wasn't made out to you, Mom. It was made out to me." The room went dead silent. The air was sucked out of the room. I simply asked. I said, my voice slicing through the tension like a razor, "Did you forge my signature on a federal insurance check, deposit it into your account, and then wire the money to Sarah?" My mother opened her mouth and closed it like a fish out of water. I thought it was a mistake," she stuttered, panic rising in her voice. "I'm his wife. It should have been mine. I just signed it to correct the mistake." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Mom, that's not correcting a mistake. That's a felony. That's fraud. And since Sarah has already spent a chunk of it on a car," I gestured to the window, "that means she's in possession of stolen funds." Sarah jumped up, knocking her chair over. "You can't be serious. You're going to send Mom to jail over money. You don't even need it," she screamed, the entitlement oozing out of her pores. "It's not about needing it," I said, standing up. "It's about the fact that Dad knew you would do this. He literally predicted this from the grave, and you proved him right in record time." I didn't wait for their excuses. I walked to the front door, but my mother grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face, the fake tears she uses when she's cornered. "Please, son, we can fix this. Sarah can return the car. We can split the money. Don't call the police." I looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had signed my name without a second thought. "It's too late for that," I said, pulling my arm away. "I already spoke to the insurance company's fraud department this morning when I got the notification that the check had been cashed. I thought maybe it was a glitch. I came here hoping, praying, that you hadn't done what I thought you did, but you did." At that moment, as if on cue, or maybe just due to the cosmic timing of the universe, Blue and red lights flashed through the front window. I hadn't called the police, but the bank had. When you deposit $500 check with a forged signature, banks tend to notice, especially when the insurance company flags it. The knock on the door was heavy and authoritative. The next hour was a blur of chaos. My mother was hysterical, trying to explain to the officers that it was a family misunderstanding, while Sarah was screaming at me that I was a monster. I stood on the porch, watching as they took statements. They didn't arrest her that night, White. Collar crime investigations take time, but they froze the accounts. All of them, Sarah's business money, the money for the car, Mom's retirement account where she'd mixed the funds. It was all locked down pending the investigation. I walked past the new SUV, which was about to be repossessed, and got into my modest sedan. My mother shouted from the doorway, "You've destroyed this family. I have no son." I rolled down the window and said, "You didn't want a son, Mom. You wanted a bank account, and Dad knew it. The aftermath has been brutal but necessary. The legal battle is ongoing, but the evidence is irrefutable. The forged signature was sloppy, and the bank footage shows her depositing it. Sarah had to return the car and is currently facing the reality of getting a real job because the Bank of Mom is closed for business, literally and legally. My mother is facing probation and massive fines, avoiding prison only because I decided not to press for the maximum sentence, though the insurance company is less forgiving. I haven't spoken to them since that night. I used my own savings to pay for a lawyer to ensure Dad's wishes are executed exactly as he wrote them. When the funds are eventually released to me, I'm going to take my half, pay off my mortgage just like Dad wanted, and put Sarah's half into a strict trust that pays out small monthly amounts only if she holds a steady job and passes drug tests, because that's what Dad would have done if he had the heart to be tough. I lost my mother and sister that Thanksgiving, but I realized I had lost them a long time ago. I just finally stopped paying the price of admission to be treated like a doormat. It's a heavy moral to carry, realizing that blood isn't thicker than greed, but sometimes you have to amputate the limb to save the body. I stood up for myself and for my father's memory, and while it's lonely sometimes, the peace of mind I have knowing I didn't let them dishonor him is worth every penny. If you think I did the right thing by exposing their fraud, please hit that like button because it helps me know I'm not crazy. If you want to hear more stories about family justice and standing your ground, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. And seriously, I need to know, was the trust fund too generous for Sarah, or should I have kept it all? Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.